All right, so this is a suggestion via a channel member. The name of the video is Why America Throws the Poor in Prison. This is coming from the channel The Gravel Institute. Guys, this is going to be a spicy one. All right, I can tell you this right now. So before we even jump into this here, we have a for-profit prison system, right? The prison industrial complex, let's say. I'm going to go ahead and say that that's probably one of the reasons, right? I mean, I think if you probably have more money, that means you have the ability to probably hire a lawyer. The lawyer then, in return, is going to get you out of they're going to get you out, right? Most of the time, unless it's for something major, then you belong in jail, my boy, right? I think that's kind of what it is. Unfortunately, we have a for-profit prison system. And it's not like the United States of America creates more criminals than any other country. We just have the most people in prison than any other place on Earth, guys. Our population isn't large enough to justify the amount of people we have in prison, okay? But I think that's what happens when you make it so you have some individuals acting as tax collectors, let's say, who are trying to get people into the system. So the government pays for that person being in jail, right? And then now you have more profit to your prison, if that makes any sense, right? That's kind of the view on it, at least, because I generally, truthfully, don't believe that we are more inherently, criminal than anyone else in the world is per capita. I don't think so, right? But, all right, let's go ahead and check this out immediately. See where this takes us, guys. This is going to get spicy, I'm sure.
Sean Worsley, a veteran, sentenced to 5 years in prison in Alabama for using medicinal marijuana he'd been legally prescribed to treat a traumatic brain injury.
Okay, that doesn't really mean much for the legal system, unfortunately. If it is illegal in the state, federally, let's say, if it's illegal federally, but legal like in the state, it's a little tricky, guys, right? That's why you shouldn't have messed with it in the first place until it's actually 100% legal everywhere.
Medicinal marijuana he'd been legally prescribed to treat a traumatic brain injury. Fairwayne Bryan, 63 years old, sentenced to life in prison for stealing a pair of hedge clippers because 18 years before he had been convicted of robbing a taxi driver.
So he's just a second offender.
Khalif Browder, a 16-year-old held in prison for 3 years in New York for allegedly stealing a backpack. Charged, but never put on trial. Beaten by prison guards and placed in solitary confinement for 2 years, he attempted suicide twice.
2 years?
In prison. Still traumatized, he committed suicide at his mother's home after being released.
Stop saying that word. All right, guys, so that last one there was probably the roughest one of them all, right? To be locked away, like we have things for this. You get what I mean here? I guess depending on what was in that backpack, right? If it was worth more than a set amount of money, I guess, right? That's the reason why you got more time in there. But never saw a judge. That's a little weird. That one right there is weird, very weird.
These are just 3 drops in a sea of similar stories all across the United States.
Okay.
Why are these stories so common? One of the ugly truths about our country is that we lock up a higher percentage of our people than any other nation on earth.
Yes, we do.
In fact, we imprison more people than any other country, period. We are the biggest prison in the world. We have a significantly larger prison population, 2.1 million people, than China, a country with 3 times our population. Mm-hmm. Why does the United States lock up so many of its people? More than the entire population of New Mexico. Where did this wholesale imprisonment of huge groups of people, what we call mass incarceration, come from?
Guys, it can also go back to something troubling about our past, right? Like back when people were kept in bondage, right? That's then they were freed. The only way to get that level of like labor, free labor, is to put people in prison, basically. And if they get into prison, then guess what you can utilize? Their labor, right? That may be something there. There may be something there, guys. All right. It feels like that could be it also. It could be the profit thing for the locality that built the jail, right? One, and two, just the history of it in itself. But now it's not specifically large scale race based. What it is socioeconomic, right? Like it could be something there in terms of how much you're making, where you're living. They may be specifically looking at areas that have less money again, so you can't hire a lawyer and get out, right? Or you can't make bail, so that means they can utilize your labor. There could be a couple of things here. I mean, just sitting there thinking about it, trying to logic it out, that's what it could be, at least mentally.
Let's go back a few decades. Starting in the 1960s, many companies looking to cut costs moved production out of big cities like Detroit, Milwaukee, Cleveland, or simply automated away big chunks of their workforce.
Okay.
Their employees were left jobless, and manufacturing was ripped out of great cities that used to be synonymous with industry. After 1970, unemployment for non-college educated men soared, especially black people who were just then entering the middle class. People who could leave the cities, mostly middle-class whites, fled to the suburbs, a phenomenon we call white flight. This led to a vicious spiral. Cities lost tax revenue, schools lost funding, houses lost their value, local economies collapsed.
If black people were able to actually move out, would it be called black flight? I wonder. Like the whole concept of white flight, it is intriguing to me because it's like, listen, bro, if you have the money to not be in an area that is completely going down, why would you stay in that area? Like you realize that the value of your house is now starting to plummet. There is no longer work in this area. It's time to go, specifically if you can afford it, right? But either way.
Flight. This led to a vicious spiral. Cities lost tax revenue, schools lost funding, houses lost their value, local economies collapsed, job opportunities dried up. As urban poverty rose, crime rose with it. And the arrival of crack cocaine in the 80s, helped along by U.S. foreign policy in Central America, made
Iran-Contra
the problem even worse. By the 1970s and 80s, there was a full-blown social crisis in American cities, resulting in a steady increase in crime.
Okay,
now,
yeah.
American politicians could have responded one way. They could have confronted the root causes of crime by reinvesting in hollowed-out cities, building a healthier, cleaner, more prosperous society.
That doesn't make any sense, though. I mean, for the sole purpose of making an income or seeing a return on the investment, why would they invest in an area that is completely blighted? They should, for the sake of morality, if that's the case here, right? But everything related to the United States of America and its government is a company or company-oriented. There's no profit in bringing up a blighted community. You're just going to make it so the property value then shoots up, and then the individuals that were living there can no longer live there. You'd basically make the United States of America the largest gentrifier in the United States of America. Okay, that's what you would do by doing that, because then people would run back to the community, and guess what happens with supply and demand when it comes to an asset such as a house?
But that is not what they did. Instead, they unleashed a tsunami of incarceration. They chose to lock up millions of people rather than accept the type of broad redistribution of wealth, jobs, and power that a real solution would have demanded. Mass incarceration is expensive. But for the well-off, it turns out to be a lot cheaper than actually solving the problem. So the U.S. government decided to combine the harshest penal state in the world with the stingiest welfare state. This carceral approach was also effective politics, with white voters terrified of rising crime from increasingly non-white cities. Republicans and Democrats alike saw a way to exploit racist fears and get cheap votes. It started with Richard Nixon's promise of law and order in 1968. Ronald Reagan vowed to get tough on crime in the 80s. By 1996, a Democrat like Hillary Clinton was warning of young, quote, super predators with, quote, no conscience, no empathy, people who must be, quote, brought to heel. Over those decades, politicians from both parties and at all levels passed harsher and harsher laws feeding the prison system. The war on drugs started in 1971. Cruel mandatory minimum laws came in the 1980s. 3 strikes laws arrived in the 90s. You could be put away for life without parole for stealing a pair of socks if it was your third offense.
Then why are you stealing? I hear you, bro. I mean, it seems like you're trying to take the concept of personal responsibility away from the individuals that are actually committing crimes. Okay, let's just be honest here. Now, there are certain circumstances that should not, they're just not jailable, guys. All right, that people are in prison for, which make no sense. Definitely, but bro, if you didn't pay for it, it's not yours. That's the reality, I think personally. Like if you were to put in like let's say education so people can actually get out of situations, that'll be more beneficial than specifically locking people up all day long, guys. Just a thought here, but also at the same time, certain things should just not be normalized, and I don't think criminality should be that, regardless. Right? If you break the social contract, you should be in jail. The three-strike rule, that was a lot, guys, right? But stop committing the crimes, guys. Like specifically, if you're actually doing it, what type of remorse are you asking for me to have in this instance, at least? Like if you're actually doing it, okay.
Tough on crime prosecutors and judges gained office across the country. Huge sums of money were spent on building new prisons, which housed millions of people. As a result, incarceration rose dramatically. In 1968, America's prison population was 102 per 100,000 people, in line with other developed countries. By 2005, it had risen sevenfold to 737 per 100,000, the highest in the world. Even as crime fell, with murders in New York dropping 90% in the 90s, mass incarceration kept on growing. Why didn't prison populations fall once crime started declining? It's because prisons are by no means only about crime. They're also about keeping the least advantaged people in line. Prison has become the place to warehouse people with mental illnesses, people experiencing homelessness, and people with addictions that the system is not designed to help. Instead of solving these problems,
there's no profit in these things.
We use prison to disappear the people who have these problems. With this surging population, prisons are crowded and violent. People in prison are robbed of their humanity, often brutalized by guards, and without real rehabilitation or good options for reentry into society, are sometimes turned into the hardened criminals the system believes them to be.
Right. That definitely. Like when it comes to like incarceration, I'm definitely more into the realm, let's say, of the Scandinavian model. I think that's a pretty much the more intelligent way to do things, specifically if your goal is to stop recidivism. But if your goal is to maintain it so you can maintain people inside of this warehouse, then continue prison as it is today, I guess, right?
That's why academic evidence suggests that prisons make people more likely to engage in criminal behavior, not less. You can't eradicate crime without eradicating the root causes of crime, including prison. And it was poor and non-white communities that were the hardest hit. Hurt by deindustrialization and then criminalized by the state, Black men born between 1965 and 1969 have been more likely to go to prison than to graduate from college. Less educated people in general are victim to this. A white man without a high school degree has a 25% chance of being imprisoned in his lifetime. A black man without a high school degree has a 70% chance. Mass incarceration has done massive harm to our communities, our families, our children, and to the millions of people caught up in it. Mass incarceration cannot exist in a healthy society. It is an intentional humanitarian disaster.
Bro, I just thought about something that's valid. That's incredibly valid, actually. Like, think about like hood culture, like the culture that thrives in all of these ghettos that are in the United States of America. And it's not like ghettos don't exist around the world. It's not that. It's not like poverty specifically is the main indicator of who is going to be a criminal or not. It's not that, okay? It could be partially because you have to do what you have to do for your family, that type of thing, right? But there are definitely poor people who just don't do this, right? They go without before they go taking something from someone else, guys. But what he just said right here kind of struck me as, yeah, that's right. It may be right. Like because listen to the music that comes out of all these ghettos, right? Like, listen to it. They are all basically in a rush to get right back to prison. Okay, all of them. Listen to what they're saying. Listen to the music that's being created. because that's all they know, right? Like specifically, if you are in some type of ghettoized area, you most likely have encountered multiple members of your family who have been in prison because these are basically the culling grounds, let's say, for prison. And if everyone you've known or know about or around are all criminals and prisoners of sorts, then what else can you actually talk about? Your whole life is miserable. Your whole life is trying to find the easiest way to, I don't know, get the most money as humanly possible in the situation that you're currently in, not realizing that the entire ideology is wrong, it's bad, but you know what? Listen, who am I to say these things, guys, right? People call me Uncle Tom all day because I don't adhere to the nonsense, I guess. But it seems, no. And the people that generally call me that have no idea who Uncle Tom actually was. They just say it. But either way, that's not the point. Let's let them dwell in their ignorance, yes? But it sounds right, though, what this guy just said here. It feels a lot like, hey, listen, you are this. You're acting like this. You represent this. You promote this because this is legitimately all you've known from your fathers, your uncles, your grandfathers. This is all they spoke about. Toxic nonsense that literally has no benefit to society at all. Has not a single bit of benefit. But let's talk about ending the life of someone down the street, you know, that lives on a specific street that, you know, they don't even own property on, and neither you own property on the street that you're, you know, claiming until the end of time, guys, based off some ridiculous color. Right? Yeah, it's all like prison stuff, bro. Right? Like I've seen like Scared Straight, and every single thing that they know and do is pretty much prison. That's it. And they act very similar to the individuals that are basically promoting the nonsense, right? The ones who will attack someone based off of the color they're wearing, guys. But either way.
A war by the ruling class on the poor and the marginalized. Mass incarceration is a choice. But it's their choice, not ours.
Okay.
This is Chase Madar, professor of law for the Gravel Institute.
Gravel, professor of law. All right, guys, that was intriguing. That's not how that button goes. It's this button. That was definitely an intriguing video, guys. I like conversations. I like the ability to kind of talk about things. You know, open minds and things like that, guys. I can't really tell the slant of this video here, guys, but it felt good. Personally, it didn't feel too overtly kind of leaning in one or the other specific direction, so I respect that a lot, actually. Because generally, you guys either send me something extremely right or extremely left. So let's do more of these type of things, guys, please. I beg of you. But in the meantime, listen, guys, tell me in the comments what you guys think about my theory. Seriously. But I'll catch you guys later. The fact that you just made it to the end of the video says a whole lot, actually. We have a couple other channels. Mr. L. Boyd Music, Mr. L. Boyd Movie Reacts, along with Mr. L. Boyd Discusses, where I just generally speak about the things that specifically matter to me. But in the meantime, I'll catch you guys later.